Rangers radioed, "We're surrounded by 50 enemies." Then she killed them from 2 miles with her rifle. The Afghan mountains were cold that morning, so cold that even the air seemed to hold its breath. At the edge of a forward operating base in Nuristan, a U.S. Army Ranger squad had gone radio silent. Inside the command post, Lieutenant Sarah Kane, sniper of the 75th Ranger Regiment, adjusted her headset. Static filled the line. Then, through the crackle, came a trembling voice. The battlefield was silent. Smoke drifted like ghosts across the valley floor. Through her scope, Sarah saw the last of the enemy retreating into the hills. She pressed her headset. "Command, this is Sniper Team Charlie. Rangers secured. Area clear." There was no response, only static. Then a sharp tone. "Charlie, report your position. You are outside the engagement zone. Return immediately." Her pulse slowed. She knew what that meant. She disobeyed direct orders. Ethan glanced at her. "Ma'am, if they court-martial you..." She cut him off. "If they're alive, it was worth it." They started down the ridge, rifles slung over their backs. The path was steep, treacherous. The sun had dipped low, casting gold and blood-red hues across the rock. Halfway down, she spotted movement. A ranger, limping, waving. It was Cole. Cole stumbled toward her, covered in dust and blood, his face pale but alive. "Sarah, you crazy bastard," he said with a weak grin. She smiled through tears. "You're welcome." He collapsed into her arms. Ethan moved quickly, checking his pulse. "He's stable, but barely." "We need evac." Sarah keyed her radio. "Command requesting medevac at grid 27 Delta. Ranger down." A voice came back, cold, professional. "Evac approved. Stand by for extraction." "Command requests debrief upon return." Cole coughed, chuckling faintly. "Debrief. Yeah, they'll love hearing about this." Sarah's jaw tightened. "They can call it what they want. I call it doing my job." The sound of rotor blades echoed in the distance. Dust swirled as a Black Hawk descended into the valley. Sarah looked back at the ridge, the place where 50 men died, and one promise was kept. The next morning, the base smelled of diesel and coffee. Sarah sat across from Major Harlan, the battalion officer, sharp uniform, colder eyes. He slid a report across the table. "Lieutenant Kane, unauthorized engagement, violation of command protocol. You could have sparked an international incident." Sarah said nothing. Her knuckles were white. Harlan leaned forward. "Why did you take the shot?" She met his eyes. "Because no one else could. And because I won't listen to silence while my brothers die." The room went still. Harlan studied her, then sighed. "You know what this means?" She nodded. "Suspension. Maybe worse." He stood up, closing the file. "You saved 6 Rangers, Lieutenant. I'll make sure the board knows that. Dismissed." Outside, Ethan waited by the door. "What did they say?" Sarah gave a faint smile. "They said the truth scares them." That night the base was quiet again. Rain tapped gently on the tent roof. Sarah sat alone, writing a letter, not a report, but a confession. To the wife of Staff Sergeant Cole Rains. "He wanted me to tell you he's alive. He fought until his last bullet, and he smiled when he heard the chopper. I broke orders to keep that promise. I'd do it again." She sealed the letter, her hand trembling slightly. Then she looked at the photograph pinned above her bunk, her old squad from Syria. Cole standing beside her, both smiling under the desert sun. Ethan entered quietly. "Couldn't sleep?" She shook her head. "Some battles don't end when the shooting stops." He nodded slowly. "You know, ma'am, command might take your rifle." She looked up at him, eyes steady. "They can take the rifle, but they'll never understand the weight of pulling that trigger." 2 weeks later, Washington, D.C.A. military courtroom. Flags, silence and judgment. Sarah stood before a panel of officers. Her record was flawless. Until that day, the prosecutor read from the file. Lieutenant Kane, you disobeyed a direct order from Central Command and engaged hostiles in a civilian-protected zone. Do you deny it? I don't. Then why? She took a breath. Because the rulebook didn't climb that ridge. I did, and I saw 50 men who were about to die. I had the shot, and I took it. You can punish me for breaking a rule, but don't pretend you'd have done nothing. The room was silent. Even the prosecutor didn't meet her eyes. After a long pause, the presiding officer said quietly, "Charges dropped. Case closed." Sarah saluted, turned and walked out, not as a hero, but as a soldier who'd carried both a rifle and a conscience. Mayday. We're surrounded. 50 tangos. Grid 27 Delta. Low on ammo. Silence. Sarah froze. She recognized that voice. Staff Sergeant Cole Rains. Her best friend. The man who once saved her life in Syria. Her hands shook, but her eyes didn't. "Command, this is Sniper Team Charlie," she said calmly. "Ranger Team trapped 2 miles north. Request permission to engage from Overwatch." The reply came, "Denied. It's a no-fire zone. Civilians in area." Sarah looked through her scope toward the mountains, seeing nothing but fog and rock. She whispered under her breath, "If I wait for permission, they'll all die." She grabbed her rifle, a custom M2010 enhanced sniper system, 7.62 milliliters, and started climbing the ridge alone. Every step crunched against frozen gravel. The sun was rising, painting the valley in pale gold. Her spotter, Private First Class Ethan Ward, chased after her. "Ma'am," command said, "hold position." "I'm not asking for permission," she said without turning back. "I'm going to bring them home." They reached the Overwatch point, 2 miles from the last known Ranger coordinates. Through her scope, she scanned the valley, and then she saw them. Tiny figures, pinned down behind a crumbling stone wall. Enemy fighters closing in from every side. Ethan whispered, "There's too many." "You can't see clear through the fog," Sarah exhaled slowly. "Then I'll clear the fog myself." Her finger rested lightly on the trigger. The world went silent except for her heartbeat. She whispered, "Wind 12 knots east. Distance 3,200 meters. 1 shot." On promise, she aligned the crosshairs on the first target, an insurgent dragging a PKM machine gun into position. She adjusted for wind drift, squeezed the trigger. Crack. The round traveled 2 miles across open air, and the man dropped instantly. "Impact confirmed," Ethan muttered. Eyes wide, Sarah didn't blink. Second shot, third, fourth. Each bullet found its mark, through the fog, the wind, and the chaos. The trapped Rangers on the ground didn't know where salvation was coming from, only that death was suddenly falling from the sky, saving them 1 shot at a time. Then a burst of machine gun fire lit up the horizon. The enemy spotted her flash. Bullets started hitting the rocks around them. Ethan shouted, "They've seen us!" Sarah stayed calm. "Good. That'll make it easier." As the firefight raged, Ethan reloaded, hands trembling. "Why are you risking this?" "Command will court-martial you." Sarah's voice was steady, almost cold. "You ever lose someone you should have saved?" He didn't answer. She went on. 2 years ago, Syria. Cole pulled me out after I froze up under fire. I promised him I'd never freeze again. A bullet grazed her shoulder, tearing her uniform. She didn't flinch. Instead, she refocused, her breath slowing. Through the scope, she saw Cole's position. He was hit, bleeding, barely conscious, but still firing. She whispered, "Hang on, Cole, I'm still here." Then she took the hardest shot of her life, a 3,000-meter precision through fog, wind, and elevation, hitting the RPG gunner about to end Cole's squad. The explosion missed them by inches. Ethan exhaled shakily. That was impossible. Sarah just said, no, that was necessary. Minutes turned into hours. The valley below was chaos. Smoke, gunfire, cries for help. Sarah and Ethan had only 5 rounds left. Cole's voice came faintly again through static. Kane, if you can hear this, tell my wife. No, she whispered. You'll tell her yourself. She dialed elevation, adjusted her last magazine, 5 rounds. 50 enemies still moving. The math didn't make sense, but her will did. Her right eye lined up the next target, the insurgent commander. She fired. The man dropped. His fighters hesitated, then panicked. She used the last 4 shots to collapse their flank one by one. Then, silence. No more movement. No more radio calls. Just the wind. She lowered her rifle, eyes wet but unbroken. Rangers aren't surrounded anymore, she whispered. Weeks later, Sarah returned to the base in Afghanistan. No fanfare. No medals. The men she saved were already back on patrol, their wounds healing. Their eyes still haunted. Cole limped toward her, bandages on his arm. I heard you won your case, he said, grinning. Sarah shrugged. Won't call it that. I just told the truth, he nodded. The truth's rare around here. She looked past him, toward the ridge, a silhouette against the fading sun. Still feels like it's watching me, she whispered. Cole followed her gaze. It should. You changed what that ridge means to all of us. That night, around a fire, the squad shared stories. None of them called her a hero. They just passed her coffee, nodded, and said, "Glad you were up there, and for the first time in years." Sarah allowed herself to smile. A week later, Command ordered her sniper rifle to be turned in. For reassignment, she carried it to the armory herself, wiping every inch of metal before handing it over. The armorer, an old sergeant, looked at her nameplate on the weapon, Sarah Kane. 75th Ranger, he said quietly. Heard this rifle made history. She shook her head. It just kept a promise. She left the room feeling lighter and somehow emptier. Ethan caught up to her outside. They're retiring the rifle, he said. Framed it in the hall. Sarah stopped walking. Framed? Yeah, they're calling it the 2-mile gun. She exhaled, a half laugh, half sob. Guess legends travel faster than bullets. Months later, Sarah stood on an old porch in North Carolina, Cole's wife. Anna Raines opened the door, a baby on her hip. Tears already in her eyes. Are you Sarah? Yes, ma'am. Anna stepped forward and hugged her. Cole told me everything. Said you were the reason he came home. Sarah swallowed hard. He's the reason I climbed that ridge. They sat on the porch for hours. No uniforms, no ranks, just 2 women who knew what war costs. Before leaving, Sarah handed her the bullet casing from that final shot, engraved with a date. Anna ran her thumb over it. You kept this? Sarah nodded. It reminded me that life's measured in choices, not orders. Anna whispered, Thank you. And Sarah said softly, Don't thank me. Just tell him I kept my promise. Back at Fort Benning, Georgia, a new class of Rangers trained under the blazing sun. Sarah stood on the range, now an instructor, her voice carried through the air. A rifle's not a weapon. It's a responsibility. The difference between a killer and a protector is purpose. The young soldiers listened, some curious, some skeptical. She looked through their faces, seeing herself years ago, eager, reckless, untested. During break, Ethan walked up, now a sergeant. You ever miss it? The ridge? She smiled faintly. Every day, but maybe I was meant to teach them how not to need one. As the sun set, she adjusted a rookie's stance, whispering, Steady hands. Clear mind. Always know why you pull the trigger. Years later, Sarah visited Nuristan one last time, as part of a memorial mission. The ridge was silent again. Snow covering the stones where she once lay. She set down a single shell casing beside a small plaque in honor of the rangers who held the line. The wind picked up, whistling through the valley. She closed her eyes, hearing echoes of that day. Cole's voice, Ethan's fear, the radio crackle, the gunshots fading into silence. When she opened them, the fog rolled away, and sunlight spilled across the valley, the same place that once felt like death. Now at peace, she whispered, promise kept, and walked away. They say legends are written by generals, but sometimes they're written by soldiers who broke the rules to keep the faith. Sarah Kane never sought fame, medals, or headlines, yet her name became a quiet story told in every sniper classroom. The woman who took a 2-mile shot, not for glory, but for love, loyalty, and the code that no manual could teach. Sometimes, doing the right thing means standing alone and firing a shot the world will never forget.